Welcome into the Fantasy Football Diagnostics Podcast, where we provide you with your weekly diagnosis of everything fantasy football. Whether it's season-long leagues, dynasty, DFS, or sometimes even IDP, we got you covered all year long. Let's do it. Let's get to it. Welcome into the Fantasy Football Diagnostics Podcast. I'm Jon Jeune at the real Jon Jeune _FF, and it is Friday, September 12th, 7:02 a.m. Eastern, and I am back with another episode of the Fantasy Football Diagnostics Podcast, specifically the Week 2 Fantasy Football matchup. So hopefully you guys were locked in for Week 1. It was a pretty solid week, actually, if I must say so myself. If you aren't aware of what this show is about, this matchup show every Friday, we give out the top guys that are outside the top 10 at those onesie positions, quarterback, tight end, that we feel like should get into that top 10 of their position or are viable plays, whether you're in two quarterback leagues or maybe you're in a deeper league and you need help at the tight end position or you're streaming, things like that. We also look at guys that are outside the top 20 of their respective positions at the running back and wide receiver position that are viable flex plays, guys you should consider putting in your lineups. So, and then as the season progresses, we're going to, highlight those guys that are maybe ranked inside those thresholds according to Fantasy Football Expert consensus rankings that we feel like probably shouldn't be inside that top 10, might have a subpar performance there. So before I get any further, just do want to highlight, make sure you comment, like, subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, just make sure you hit that subscribe button. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, make sure you go ahead and subscribe to the podcast there. Make sure you're following on all the socials. I'm at the real Jon J _FF, and the Fantasy Football Diagnostics podcast is at FF Diagnostics. That's going to be on both Instagram and X. A lot of the content, the video content you will see on Instagram, it's not on X right now, but we will work to figure that part out as well. So, but a lot of the video content, the reels, that's going to be on Instagram every week. We do Thursday Night Football picks. We also do starts of the week. So make sure you're tapped into that. All right, let's recap last week. Last week was a solid week. Gave out 18 picks. We had 8 guys beat their ECR by 10 spots or more. We had another 4 of the 18 guys beat their ECR outright. We had 2 guys that just missed, that fell short of their expert consensus ranking. So that's what we call 2 misses. And we have 4 guys that failed to meet their ECR by 10 spots or more. So that's what we call big misses. So just so to recap, big hits are guys that beat their ECR by 10 spots or more. A hit is a guy that beat their ECR outright. And then the vice versa of that would be a big miss as you miss your ECR by 10 spots or more. A miss is that you just missed your ECR outright. So at the quarterback position last week, we had Justin Fields beat his ECR by 12 spots. He was ranked as a quarterback 14, finished at 2. Geno Smith, ranked as the quarterback 27, finished as the quarterback 15. Travis Etienne at the running back position was ranked running back 29, finished as the running back 6. J.K. Dobbins was ranked running back 30, finished as the running back 14. At wide receiver, we had Deebo Samuel, who was the wide receiver 38, finished as the wide receiver 6. Dante Thornton, I'm not really going to count him as a big hit here. I mean, he did outscore his ECR, but I don't think it really helped anybody. He was the wide receiver 89 coming into the week, finished at 58. Emeka Ibuka was ranked as the wide receiver 28, finished as the wide receiver 4 in PPR scoring. Zay Flowers was the wide receiver 27, finished as the wide receiver 1. Brian Robinson, this is where we get to the hits. Brian Robinson, running back 52, finished at running back 44. Again, I don't know if that really helped anyone, but that was also contingent on CMC. The bigger upside was contingent on CMC playing. I did say he was still a viable play given the CMC injury news. Um, so yeah, that wasn't necessarily like the best play there. Jordan Mason was the running back 37 coming into the week, finishes the running back 29. Tyler Warren was the tight end 11, finishes the tight end 3. Chris Olave, the tight end 32, finishes the wide receiver 32, finishes the wide receiver 26. And then for the big misses, Isaiah Pacheco, running back, was ranked as the running back 23, finishes the running back 42. Mason Taylor, tight end for the New York Jets, was ranked as the tight end 27, finishes the tight end 39. Cade Otton, the tight end 22, finished as the tight end 61, tied with a bunch of other guys who scored 0 points this week. Matthew Golden, wide receiver 41, finishes the wide receiver 84. Dalton Schultz was the wide receiver or the tight end 25, finishes the tight end 27 for a miss. And then Jerry Jeudy was the wide receiver 25, finishes the wide receiver 32. Okay, now we've got that housekeeping stuff out of the way. Let's move on to week 2 fantasy football matchup show, and let's talk the Cleveland Browns going up against the Baltimore Ravens. And I'm going to start with a guy we talked about on the waiver show, and that'll be a common theme. You'll hear guys that we talked about on the waiver show on Tuesday morning. So, don't be surprised by that. But Dylan Sampson, Cleveland running back, is the ECR PPR running back 35, had 20 touches in week 1, operating as the clear number 1 back. Judkins may still be out this week, and with the Browns being 11.5-point underdogs, he could make an impact in the passing game again, like he did last week with 8 targets, which he caught all 8 of them. Dylan Sampson, he is. People don't really know how to treat him right now, right? Because Judkins is going to come back, and is this a rental? How long can we keep this production? Can he keep this production going? And I think Sampson is going to continue to have a role, right? Like, I mean, he's looked really good. Or at least he looked really good in week 1. I think he's going to have a clear role as a pass catching back. I mean, Judkins didn't really profile as that coming out of college. I mean, played his last year at Ohio State was in a 2-back system with Travion Henderson, who operated as the receiving back, while Judkins was the early down hammer there. So I think that's going to continue here with the Browns. I think they drafted, the players they drafted this year, they've drafted with a clear idea and a clear role of how they wanted to use them, as we saw in week 1. So Dylan Sampson, I think, is going to continue to have a role as a flex play down the line at least, right? So definitely like that. Next, we also have another Cleveland rookie, Cleveland tight end Harold Fannin Jr., ECR PPR tight end 16, played 72% of the snaps in week 1 as a chess piece, lining up all over the field, seeing a team leading 9 targets. Expect him to be involved again with the potential negative game script, with the Browns being 11.5-point underdogs. People wonder, is Harold Fannin, was that a fluke? I personally do not think so. I personally think that Harold Fannin, the way the Browns used him was the way that he was utilized in college. A lot of yards after catch ability, lining him up all of the formation, even the wildcat stuff. That's all stuff that you'll see on his college film. And so I think, again, the Browns drafted this player with an idea of how they wanted to use them, and they are doing exactly that. So, Harold Fannin Jr. deserves to be in lineups this week. Tight end 16, I think he'll best that for sure. Moving on to the next game, we've got the LA Rams against the Tennessee Titans. And let's go with Tennessee Titan tight end Chikozim Okonkwo, ECR PPR tight end 20. played 87.7% of the snaps last week, which was third amongst skill position players for the Tennessee Titans, behind only Calvin Ridley and Tony Pollard. His target share was also only third uh, on this team. And so he faces the Rams defense that allowed 9 targets to the tight end position last week. I mean, we targeted them last week with Dalton Schultz. Kind of came through a little bit, but we saw Cade Stover was involved a lot as well. So I think the Titans are going to utilize Okonkwo. He's on the field. He is talented. He they do like getting him the ball in unique ways. So I think he'll be involved heavily on Sunday. Moving on to the next game, we've got the Chicago Bears going up against the Detroit Lions. And let's go with Chicago wide receiver Rome Odunze, ECR PPR wide receiver 34, played 94% of the snaps last week, which led all skill players, and a team leading 26.5% target share against a Detroit defense that, going back to last year, has allowed the most PPR points to the wide receiver position. Let's move on to Dallas going up against the New York Giants in Dallas. And let's talk about Dallas quarterback Dak Prescott. He's the ECR PPR quarterback 12. Now, I'm just expecting a bounce back game here from Dak. He had a few missed opportunities last week, could have had a much bigger fantasy day. When you look at the 2 passes to CD Lamb that, while they were both a little, had their own level of difficulty, CD Lamb is one of the best wide receivers in the league. He's got to make those catches. And then you also look at the fact that when they got down by the goal line, that turned into 2 rushing touchdowns for Javonte Williams. What if those were 2 passing touchdowns for Dak Prescott? When you look at the throw to George Pickens down the right sideline that he was being interfered with, if he's not being interfered, maybe George Pickens catches that ball, right? We've also seen George Pickens be interfered with and still make a catch, right? So that's what I'm looking at here with Dak Prescott. I think the bounce back game happens this week just purely due to positive regression here. So positive regression, negative regression, positive regression, positive. Yes, positive regression. Anyway, so with that being said, I definitely, am expecting a bounce back game here from Dak Prescott, and also expecting a bounce back game from his wide receiver 2 in George Pickens. He's the ECR PPR wide receiver 31. So again, a lot of those same things apply to George Pickens, except with the exception of, hey, maybe CeeDee Lamb if he catches those passes. But to be fair, if CeeDee Lamb catches those passes, those drives continue. More opportunities for George Pickens to make plays, things of that nature. So, we can't get so focused on the box score and what that said and what the result was, right? We're not going to, me at least, right? And if you're listening to this show, I'm not here to tell you who to play per se. I'm here to give you a process and help you understand what to look for and what I'm looking for when I'm trying to make these plays, right? When I'm trying to figure out how to set my lineup. And one of the things that I think about is not necessarily the result, but the process. How do we get to that result, right? If a guy scores 12 fantasy points, but he catches, 160-yard touchdown on one target, versus a guy that scores like 8 fantasy points, but he had like 12 targets. Who are you going to start the week after, right? And it's just like, those are the things, it's very rudimentary, but like, those are the things we have to consider. Those are things we have to think about. Moving on to the Buffalo Bills against the New York Jets. And let's talk about Buffalo wide receiver Joshua Palmer. He's the ECR PPR wide receiver 57. Palmer was third amongst wide receivers in snaps, but was productive on his 9 targets, catching 5 for 61 yards, and now faces a New York Jets secondary that allowed some serious production to number 2 wide receiver Calvin Austin last week. If Sauce Gardner travels with Keon Coleman, that leaves Palmer matched up with New York Jets cornerback Brandon Stevens, who struggled mightily last week against Calvin Austin. And so, again, that's on film. We looked at the Steelers game last week. Sauce Gardner was traveling with DK Metcalf for a decent portion of it. On Metcalf, he held Metcalf when he had coverage on Metcalf. He held him to one catch for, I think it was like 11 yards, and that was the crazy catch that got bobbled, and Metcalf eventually caught it while he was laying on his back. So teams, the Aaron Rodgers and the Steelers were constantly going at Brandon Stevens, constantly attacking him and trying to get the ball to Calvin Austin. And I think Buffalo will probably do a similar thing. And that's assuming that Sauce Gardner is on Keon Coleman. But, just thinking that would be the case there. So I like Josh Palmer here as a play, because I think this game is probably another high-scoring one here for the Jets and the Bills here. Let's move on to the next matchup here. We've got the San Francisco 49ers going up against the New Orleans Saints. And give me Chris Olave again. New Orleans wide receiver Chris Olave. He's the ECR PPR wide receiver 35. After seeing 13 targets on a 32% target share last week, I would expect him to be a little higher this week, but still not the case. I think Kellen Moore is going to make sure Olave gets the ball early and often here in this one. This game is an interesting one. You got Brock Purdy playing, or you got Brock Purdy not playing. Mac Jones will probably be making the start. You've also got, George Kittle on, put on injured reserve. Juwan Jennings, he's injured. So, the Niners are in a rough spot here when you consider all the injuries. And I don't know why. Let me see. Let me just double check. I know this game was at the Niners were 4.5-point favorites, but let me just confirm that that's still the case with the Brock Purdy news. Yeah, now they're 3-point favorites. We'll see. I think this game is interesting. I think New Orleans has a puncher's chance to win this game at home here against a banged up Niners team. Moving on to the next game, let's talk about the New England Patriots against the Miami Dolphins. And let's talk New England wide receiver Kayshon Boutte. He's the ECR PPR wide receiver 54 coming into this week. He led all New England wide receivers in snaps last week and tied for the team lead in target share on his way to catching 6 of 8 targets for 103 receiving yards, and now faces a Miami defense that struggled mightily last week. I know I didn't explicitly bring up Boutte in the waiver wire show, and I apologize for that. We did get him in there. Somebody asked a question about Boutte, and then that had put me onto him. I had completely missed his box score in the game that he had. So, definitely apologize for that. But if he's still available in your leagues, ECR PPR wide receiver 54, it's pretty evident that the fantasy community does not necessarily buy in. They haven't bought in all the way, but he's been doing this going back to last season. So, Diggs seemed to be, I don't know if he was on a snap count last week. Demario Douglas was not very effective. So Boutte seems to be, the top guy here in terms of, not just the snaps and the volume, but the production as well. Moving on to the next game, we've got the Jacksonville Jaguars going up against the Cincinnati Bengals. And let's talk Jacksonville tight end Brenton Strange, ECR PPR tight end 13. Cincinnati allowed 15 targets to the position last week. Strange was effective with his 4 targets last week, catching all 4 for 59 yards. And I think we're going to talk about him a little bit more later. Do with that information what you will. Moving on to the next game, let's talk Seattle Seahawks against the Pittsburgh Steelers. And let's talk Seattle running back Zach Charbonnet. He's the ECR PPR running back 30. Outsnapped and outcarried Kenneth Walker III last week. Not sure if that's a trend that will continue, but the question for Charbonnet has never been about talent. It's always been about opportunity. And if he continues to see, these if he continues to see those opportunities, then he should be effective against a Pittsburgh defense that struggled last year to stop the run and continued to struggle last week against the Jets and Brees Hall to stop the run. So I think Charbonnet deserves a spot in your lineup as a low end RB2 with some high end RB2 upside. Moving on to the next matchup, let's talk Denver running back J.K. Dobbins. He's the ECR PPR running back 27. Now, I don't know how long he'll be operating as the lead back. We saw RJ Harvey come in and have a break off a 50-yard run, but we should take advantage of this while we can. He played more than half the running back snaps last week and had more than half the rush attempts as well. I don't think the game gets away from the Broncos like it did for the Dolphins last week against this Colts team. So I don't think they'll have to abandon the run game here. I think Dobbins is going to be involved early and often, especially around the goal line. Let's move on to the next matchup. Let's talk Carolina Panthers against the Arizona Cardinals. And let's talk Arizona running back Trey Benson, ECR PPR running back 39. Saw 40% of the running back rushes last week to James Conner's 60% and faces a horrific Carolina rush defense. So if he gets a similar share of the work this week that he was able to get last week, he should be able to bring back some solid production for us and be a high-end RB3 with some low-end RB2 upside. Again, the Cardinals are 6.5-point favorites. Carolina looked absolutely terrible last week against Jacksonville, which that game I thought coming into it should have been much closer considering how well Carolina played at the end of last year. But if Carolina is going to play as poorly as they did last week and at the beginning of part of last year, then the Cardinals might blow the doors off the Panthers here, which leads to a really positive game script, which leads to even more opportunities for Trey Benson here. So I think he's definitely, if he's not going to be in your lineup, at a minimum, he should be on your bench. Moving on to the next matchup here. When I say on your bench, I mean like he shouldn't be on waivers, is what I mean to say when I say that. So next game, we've got the Philadelphia Eagles moving on to traveling to Kansas City to take on the Kansas City Chiefs in what is a Super Bowl rematch. Let's talk about Philadelphia wide receiver Devontae Smith. He's the ECR PPR wide receiver 26. Now, Dallas Goedert has a knee sprain, might not play this game. And if he does miss this game, Devontae Smith splits with and without Dallas Goedert. They're not something we should ignore. Devontae Smith in 17 games without Dallas Goedert in the lineup has 90 catches on 125 targets, 1,280 receiving yards to go along with 10 touchdowns. Now, that's basically a whole season right there, the 17 games. And, that production is pretty good. And just to put it in perspective, first those games with Dallas Goedert in the lineup, he's seeing basically half a target more, 17 more receiving yards per game, and a quarter of a touchdown per game. So he should be treated as a high-end wide receiver 2 here with some possible low-end wide receiver 1 upside. So I don't know how the wide receiver 26 really fits here for Devontae Smith. Moving on to Sunday Night Football, we've got the Atlanta Falcons taking on the Minnesota Vikings. And let's talk Atlanta quarterback Michael Penix. He's the ECR PPR quarterback 20. Penix was 1 yard short of a 300-yard passing game last week, plays in a dome this week, and I believe should be a high-scoring game here with the Vikings. He likes to use his legs. He's very capable of using his legs. Maybe doesn't like to, but he's very capable. And Penix, I will say this now, mark my words, he will finish this year as a QB1. Just when you look at the offense, you look at the environment, you look at the propensity to be in high-scoring games, you look at the fact that he does use his legs, Michael Penix will most definitely be a QB1 this year. Moving on to the next matchup here, Monday, the first of the Monday night doubleheader. And can I just tell you guys, I'm just going to vent for a little bit. I absolutely despise the Monday night doubleheaders. Like, despise them. There's no reason for them. It's not like, and maybe it's because I live on the East Coast, but I do not enjoy a 10 p.m. kickoff. Like there's nothing that's enjoyable about that for me. And maybe it's because I wake up early on Tuesdays to do the waiver show, and I work a full-time job, and so maybe that's part of it. But I just do not like the Monday night doubleheaders. Not a fan. But I digress. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers traveling to Houston for the first of a Monday night doubleheader. And let's talk Houston wide receiver Jaden Higgins, the rookie. He's the ECR PPR wide receiver 61. Wasn't on the field a whole lot last week, but was productive with his limited opportunities as the Texans rather, were trying to come back against the Rams. I think he could earn more opportunities as the season goes on. And this is a matchup here that could be fruitful for the Houston pass offense, as the Tampa Bay pass defense has struggled going back to last year even. So actually 2 years ago they struggled. So I like Jaden Higgins as an extension of this Houston, CJ Stroud in this Houston passing attack. Let's move on to the next matchup. Let's talk the Los Angeles Chargers going up against the Las Vegas Raiders. And let's talk Las Vegas quarterback Geno Smith. He's the ECR PPR quarterback 21. Again, going in on Geno Smith again this week. Last week, we saw him throw for 362 passing yards, just one passing touchdown. And that game wasn't even a high-scoring game. I do think we see him hit a very close to that number again at 360 yards, and maybe adding a touchdown or two could help raise the ceiling there for Geno Smith in what I feel like should be a high scoring game here between the Chargers and the Raiders, especially indoor in a dome. And again, I'm telling you guys, this Chip Kelly coordinated offense, like I think it's a perfect fit for Geno. Definitely a guy that I think is going to have some value all season long here. So let's move on to the week 2 starts of the week. And last week was rough, man. It was really rough. I mean, Joe Burrow was terrible. Bucky Irving was solid. Matthew Golden, invisible. And Njoku, I'll take partial credit for that one because Harold Fannin Jr. had such a great game and the matchup was so good. And so the process was good. The result was just not great. So let's move on to the week 2 starts of the week, though. And let's talk quarterback. And I'm going with New York Jets quarterback Justin Fields going up against Buffalo. I'm betting on Justin Fields to continue his play from last week, where he played arguably the best game of his career as a passer. We obviously know what he brings to the table with his legs, but he's going up against a Buffalo defense that, going back to last year, the end of last year, allowed the 10th most fantasy points to the position. This game, I expect it to be high scoring. The New York Jets, they scored a lot of points last week. Buffalo scored a lot of points last week. Both of their games went over. Their defenses both showed vulnerabilities last week. So I expect this to continue to be a high-scoring game. You've got two quarterbacks that can use their legs. I think Justin Fields is going to continue to produce at that QB1 level that he produced at last week when he finished as the quarterback 2. Let's move on to the running back position, and let's talk LA Rams running back Kyren Williams as he faces off against the Tennessee Titans. Now, Kyren did share a bit more of the work last week than we're used to seeing, but that he was still very much the lead guy in the backfield, and now faces off against the Tennessee defense this week that, going back to last year, allowed the 4th most PPR points to the position. So Kyren, lean on him this week. You know he likes to score those touchdowns in bunches. I expect Kyren to have a big game this week. Moving on to the wide receiver position, we're going with a stack here. Give me New York Jets wide receiver Garrett Wilson going up against the Buffalo Bills. Garrett was 3rd in target share last week across the league with a 43% target share. He's the number 1 option in this passing attack, and in a game in which they have to keep pace with Josh Allen and this Bills offense, I expect Garrett Wilson to be heavily involved in the game plan as he was last week. And last but not least, I know I teased it. Moving on to the tight end position, let's talk Jacksonville tight end Brenton Strange. Now, he's going up against Cincinnati, and I'm going back to the Cincinnati well here after trying last week, but just choosing the wrong tight end. The Bengals allowed 15 targets to opposing tight ends last week, and Strange has been effective when targeted at a high clip. Expect him to come through with a tight end 1 week here. All right, y'all. That is all I have for the week 2 matchup show. Really appreciate you guys dropping in today. Again, make sure you comment, like, subscribe. Make sure you're following me at the real Jon Jeune _FF. Make sure you're following the show at FF Diagnostics. Make sure you are, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, just make sure you hit that subscribe button there as well. And again, on Instagram at the real Jon Jeune _FF. That's where you'll see my Thursday Night Football picks. That's where you'll see the starts of the week reel. And make sure you're tapped in every Tuesday and Friday morning, 7 a.m. Eastern. Tuesday is the waiver show. Friday is the matchup show. And good luck this weekend, y'all. Have a good one. And we're out of here. Peace.